So Rob, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into the future, can you tell us little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Johannesburg. I'm a fourth generation South African. And my grandfather founded an extraordinary mining industrial business called Angloval with his best friend.
Yeah.
And I was born into one of the most privileged upbringings and families you could ever want in life, not just in Africa. So I was I was the lucky sperm club, as they say, jokingly. But
right. And I believe you went to Michael House and UCT.
Went to Ridge, Michael House, UCT, and then I spent 2 years as an infantry officer in the South African Defence Force. In those days, it was compulsory.
Right. So can you tell us what was your dream career when you grew up?
Do you know, I never really remembered what it was, but I always knew I would go into business. You know, business is my DNA, it's in my heritage. I just knew that business is what I was going to do. I didn't know what type of business, but I always had my eyes on the international stage, which many South Africans don't, because, you know, there's a long way to fly between South Africa and Europe and America. So many people focus here, which is understandable, but I always had an eye on the international.
And Rob, who inspired you in your early days?
Do you know, it moved. I was very lucky to, you know, be brought up by an extraordinary father, very loving and very kind. He didn't push me hard in any direction, but he was a loving motivator. And that's often a better way to be, you know, to praise when things are heading in the right direction and to encourage when they're not, as opposed to chide. And he was like that. And then I, along the way, met some extraordinary people and learnt all the way. And I guess one of the most defining people I worked with was Rupert Murdoch. There were a lot of very intelligent, inspirational individuals at Goldman Sachs, but I kind of felt they were sort of older equals. Whereas Rupert Murdoch, even today, must be the greatest businessman walking this planet. And I worked as his right hand after Harvard Business School for 2.5 years. And that was defining. That really was. But following that, you know, I worked very closely with Johann Rupert, also an extraordinary man in his own way, highly intelligent, very focused, and an incredible guy to work with. And along the way, I've met these incredible people, and I've learned from them all. But maybe Rupert Murdoch was the big one.
And in a nutshell, Rob, can you maybe share 1 or 2 lessons you learned from Rupert Murdoch?
Sure. Probably, you know, some of them I remember clearly from then, and some of them I kind of understood later how much I'd learned from him. And the ones I understood from him then was he was very decisive. He knew when he was hearing a story or a business opportunity or reading a business plan, he knew what he was looking for. He knew what the key drivers were, even in an area he knew not much about. I always use the example of country music television. You know, no one thought it was going to be big. It was Christian and evangelical music at the time was going through the roof. Country music, no one gave a damn. Nashville, who cares? But he saw, when I presented to him, the power of what it could become within his network. And he was incredibly decisive. You know, he'd get up very early in the morning, put all the newspapers on his bed, call Australia, or on his desk, and he'd call Australia, and he'd say, why is this advertisement long and not horizontal? Why is this story on this page and not that? And after 15 minutes, he'd then go and talk to Asia or India and then the UK, and we were in New York, and boom, 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 boom throughout the day. Different industries, I mean, broadly called media. And he knew how it all fitted into the global scheme. And what I learned from him later in life, I realized was, but I had it in me anyway, was a care for the common man. Rupert Murdoch is not a man who takes himself seriously. He's not a show-off. He doesn't want to hang around stars. He treats the doorman and the taxi driver the same as the billionaire and the super athlete and the movie star. Treats them the same. You know, if you tell him a joke, he laughs, and he laughs because it's funny. And he's not there to be impressed by other people or to have people impress him or to him to impress anyone. He was extraordinary. He'd talk to the doorman. You know, we used to take taxis now and again in those days. We'd walk out, get a cab in New York. He'd ask the taxi driver, what newspapers do you read? Why? He was an extraordinary man. He is an extraordinary man with the common person. And he treated them all the same, like Rudyard Kipling would say, you know. And that is a power that carried through my life. You know, every year, I remember in London, I'd say to Annette, my amazing assistant who's been with me 26 years, I'd say to her, who do we need to thank? And, you know, with all the obvious names would come up. And then I'd say, okay, those are great, but let's send a little thank you to the doorman. You know, he's always nice to us. And that maitre d' always makes an effort to get us a good table and let us in. And, you know, the cleaning lady, you know, she's so sweet and quiet and no one gives her any love. Let's send her some flowers or drop her a note. Or, you know, I've done it all my life. And from Rupert Murdoch, I learned that. I had it in me, but I learned it from him. And he's still the same. Great.
And Rob, looking back over your career, would you say there was a major turning point where things could have gone different?
Yeah, tons. You know, I built a very big sports internet media business, Sportal, that didn't make it through the .com crash. But, you know, my wife and I have been studying Stoicism recently, and Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism, Zeno from ancient Greece. There's an expression called amor fati, and basically what it's saying is, every day that you get up and you're awake, it's a good thing, you're alive. You can make good things happen. And even bad things like this terrible fire, good things will come of it. You've got to see the good in everything, even the bad stuff. And Sportal was a big wipeout. You know, I had to lay off 200 people. We lost $130 million. You know, Johan Rupert invested, great friends of mine like Johan. But I learned how to handle adversity. You know, I learned how to handle difficult situations. And should I have focused on one or two businesses, I'd have been immensely wealthier. But it's not in my nature. I get excited and enthusiastic about the next new thing. I'm very good at starting something. And I'm now very good at bringing someone in at the right time. So everything's a learning. Everything's a learning point. Do I have any regrets? Not one. Not one. I think maybe one little regret. Yeah. In 1983 to 82, before I went into the army, I went to a party. My brother, 4 years younger than me, he must have been 18, got pushed into the pool by a bully. And it was my job as the older brother to go and do something about it. And I didn't. I should have just gone and hit the guy or thrown him in the pool. But I just didn't do it, and I felt bad. And, you know, it's a stupid thing, but that's probably my only regret.
And Rob, can you tell us what is driving you today?
Well, here's the funny thing. This last 3 months, I've worked harder than I've ever worked in my life. I've launched a $400 million SPAC on the New York Stock Exchange. I'm raising a very large tech fund, which is going incredibly well. I've co-founded 2 tech businesses, and I've bought an airport in 3 months. In lockdown, I did my to-do list and then my to-do list and my next to-do list. So I don't know why I'm working so hard, but I think it's because I've begun to peak. I've reached my best of my strengths and abilities, and I know what I'm doing for once in my life, age 60. It's taken a while. So I'm buzzing. I love business. You know, I see opportunities. I can help people, and I'm having fun. You know, and lockdown, I spent a year with my family. It's been fantastic. Best thing ever for me.
And Rob, talking about the future, now that we are stepping into a new world post-COVID, what does the future of leadership mean to you?
It's changed enormously. You know, leadership is softer now than it was. In the older days, when you had big corporate structures, you needed a leader to lead. This is the direction we're going, even if they had no idea if they were right or wrong. They had to be decisive, boom, 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 boom. But now it's softer because what's fundamentally important is to hire people better than yourself every single day. And I've become very good at that because I know my weaknesses. So I'm doing this business we're launching called Moment, which is a social media marketplace for auctioning non-fungible tokens. Most people don't know what I'm talking about. They will, NFTs. The three co-founders of mine are 22, 24, and 25. But their maturity is head and shoulders what I was at that age. And so my leadership is experience, some gravitas, the contacts I have. But in terms of intellect and business nous, they've got as good as I have. They're extraordinary. So it's a different form of leadership. But I think leadership is still about being decisive. You know, I make decisions all day. I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but momentum is a positive thing. And procrastination is a negative thing.
And Rob, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
Hire people better than yourself. You know, I said that before and I say it again. I know what I'm good at. Public speaking, sales, enthusiasm, a form of social, energetic leadership. I have courage and bravery, and I'm aware of my faults, of which there are many. I just think leadership now is such a broader concept. It's so much broader in this world because, you know, we're not just competing with English-speaking and German and French-speaking Westerns. We're competing with Taiwanese and Argentinians and Nigerians and Kenyans. The world has changed. You know, do you still need to go to Harvard Business School? I don't think so. I mean, if you can get in, I'd never get in now. I don't think so. Do we even need to go to university? I'm having my doubts. I'm really having my doubts in this world. I know what you need to study at school. I know what you need to study when you leave school. But do you need university for that? I'm not so sure. It's really changing fast.
And Rob, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what do you tell them about social media? How should they navigate social media to build their own leadership brands?
So you raise an interesting point. I am not on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or Instagram, and I never have been. I am incredibly well connected, incredibly well networked, and people take my calls and they know who I am. And I'm not on any of the social media, and that's a good thing. You know, my wife showed me a little bit of Instagram, and it's ridiculous, it's pathetic. It's like how you want people to see you. It's like when you're an old person and you remember everything you did in your life, you don't remember the bad stuff. You just remember the good stuff. It's like a photo album. You just have the good stuff. But life isn't like that. Life is adversity and toughness and things like that. And I just think Instagram is a horrific. It's Facebook even worse, liking each other. I mean, I'd like to swear now and say, F that. But I think social media is a disaster. And there are new ways around that, you know. I think the core values are the core values and they're never going to change. And social media has broken those or disintermediated good people from their core values. So I'm down with Facebook.
Thank you. And Rob, what is your advice for future leaders when it comes to challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
So I'm not on any social media. I can't be deplatformed. I can tell the truth. I can say things like, not all cultures are the same. Some religions are better than others. Men and women are not equal. They should be treated equally. They should be paid the same for their jobs. They are not equal at all. They are different beings. And there are only two genders. Whichever moron came up with more than two genders is very stupid. And there are a lot of them out there. Now, I can say all of that, and I can't be deplatformed. I can't be fired. So I have a unique power to tell the truth, which most people are too scared to do. So I think future leaders need to grow some balls start telling the truth, start standing up for what they believe in. And if they get to have employees that get upset, that are too woke and liberal, let them leave. Build a business that you believe is based on good, fundamental, and let me say it, Judeo-Christian principles. And if you build a business on those principles, you will build a great business and attract the right people.
And Rob, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
So public speaking and sales, fundamental, but good leaders have that anyway. They may not know they have it, and it may evolve and improve, but that's fundamental. I mean, if I see somebody that I know can sell and they don't know it, I get excited. I go, you are going into sales, not marketing, not PR. That's for the people behind the lines. Sales is the most fundamental skill. But then today, you know, I think reading, writing, and arithmetic, it's called the 3 R's, but arithmetic, reading, writing, arithmetic. If somebody comes out of high school with excellent reading, writing, and arithmetic, they're on track. The other subjects you can do in your spare time. But what kids need coming out of school and university is programming, coding, understand blockchain, understand machine learning and artificial intelligence, understand these bases of technology, because technology is changing the world.
And Rob, as a mentor, Chess.
And chess. Chess is the best sport ever. The only difference between black and white moves first. That's it. Otherwise, it's computational power, it's focus, it's strategy, it's discipline, and it's being quiet and taking on your opponent. It's the greatest sport ever.
So Rob, can you tell us how often do you play chess?
Not as often as I should. I'm very proud that I played Gary Kasparov. But the reality is there were 20 of us around the table, you know, and he played one, the next, and I ended up being third last to be beaten. I'm very proud of that. And it was in Tunisia, of all places. And Gary would have been a fantastic new leader for chess. But so we traveled to many countries together. And interesting, I'll tell you an interesting thing. Every African country we went to that said they'd back Gary, backed Gary. They were not bribed. But a number of European countries committed to back Gary and at the last minute switched. What does that tell you? Pretty embarrassing.
Yep. And Rob, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two when you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
You know, what makes me thrilled is the 2 companies this year that I co-founded. And I asked to be a co-founder of each of them. And here's the story. Michael Louis Jr., I'd never met. His parents said, we have a 24-year-old son, got a great job, been offered CEO of a tech company. Will you meet him and advise him? I spent 20 minutes on the phone, realized this young man was smart as ever. I said, fly to Cape Town. Came down that weekend. We talked about his career. I said, you're making a big mistake if you stay with the company you're with. If you quit now and had to start your own business, any idea what it would be? And he told me, he said, yes, data analytics. And he explained it. And I said, well, why are you telling me of a business you know you're going to do and you're considering staying with the company you're with? He said, well, I'm only 24 and I can't afford it. I said, you can afford it now. If you quit your job, prove to me you have, I'll back you. On the Monday, he put in his resignation. He believed in me and I believed in him. The business launches in July, fully funded. Michael Louis Jr., D team. The second story is 4 weeks ago, I got a call from 3 young guys and I knew one of them somewhat well. They called me 6 times on Friday. I was like, what are you up to? They said, we're launching a new business. We have to have you involved. When we meet, you'll understand why. On Monday, I had a 1-hour meeting with them, went for 8 hours, and I wired them $50,000 on a handshake. And they launched this weekend. It's called Moment. It's an NFT platform. And I mean, those are just, I'm so proud of these young people listening to me taking the big step of leaving their other businesses to go into the unknown on a handshake, on a 60-year-old guy's view of the world. And they'll both make big successes. Watch this space. D-Team, Moment, they're going to be big businesses.
Okay, we will certainly watch. And Rob, you mentioned your mentors, Johan, Rupert Murdoch, and so can you maybe, who else? Are there any role models of leadership that future leaders should study?
So Johan Rupert Murdoch, I mean, I got to know Warren Buffett, but that's not kind of my kind of guy. He's obviously hugely successful, just not my kind of guy. There's a fantastic guy called Dan Friedkin from Texas. There's a fantastic called Dermot Desmond from Ireland. And both of them have a similar characteristic, a twinkle in the eye, a sense of humor, an ability to see the fun in a difficult situation, to laugh with you, not at you, and to just stick with things in the bad times. The good times are easy. Johan Rupert used to say, you can give me good news by letter, but bad news, you call me straight away, because maybe we can do something about that and fix it. And that's a great comment, you know. Good news is good news, but bad news, you need to focus and fix. So Dermot Desmond, Dan Friedkin, Johan Rupert Murdoch, you made a big impression on my life, and I'm really very grateful. But Dad, 95 years old, still flying airplanes, you're still number one, and I love you.
Your dad is still flying airplanes?
95.
Wow. That's incredible.
He's not allowed passengers with him, and he has 7 other pilots, but he's allowed to fly.
And Rob, last but not least, how can our listeners reach out to you if need be? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, by email.
Okay.
Shoot me an email. I can't cope with WhatsApps anymore, or texts or phone calls. It's just too many.
Sure.
Send me an email. My amazing Annette Barrett, who works with me, will have a quick look, know if it's relevant, know if I can help. And then, meetings are too difficult on lockdown anyway. We do quick call, and if I can help that person, I help them. If I can't, I'll tell them or send them in another direction. And I guess the final comment is just don't take yourself too seriously. I never take myself too seriously at all. My wife is 21 years younger than me and 21 years more mature. And I'm very lucky to have her.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and reminding us.
I have more insights than wisdom, but I think wisdom I'm gaining.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. Have a great day.
Great pleasure, Nick.